Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird, true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. This is my channel's weekly compendium, ending Monday, August 8th, 2022. Case file number 711, written by the Landlocked Mermaid, 88. They were going to buy us dragons. We were with our boyfriends. We were happy. They were going to buy us dragons. My sister and I were in our late 20s, white girls, and our boyfriends white boys of the same age. Angie, her boyfriend, RT, myself and boyfriend JC. For many years we would get together every weekend. I have a son who would come, but none of us could remember him there this particular weekend. It was snowing a lot. I remember just getting nestled in with Angie. The guys were heading out on their usual shopping trip. They did this every weekend, scouting out the dollar stores to buy us dragon figurines. Then all of a sudden, the loudest thunder I'd ever heard. Our boyfriends came running back in, having not yet made it to their car. The four of us had a brief discussion, all agreeing that thundersnow had happened. Although we all freaked out, we tried to put it out of our minds. Then they left. Angie and I continued with the same life. A much different, very messed up life. A couple of years later, Angie and RT got new friends. Angie and I always kept in touch though. There was a strain, a pause in our relationship for too many years. Our boyfriends ultimately betrayed both of us over the years. There are a lot of ways you can betray someone. After RT betrayed Angie, she kind of went into hiding. 20 plus years later, I was bringing over a pizza. I must say, pizza has a way of making things better. Her new boyfriend, Sid, answered the door. I basically held the pizza captive until she came out. It definitely renewed our bond. Angie and I most definitely agree that after the thundersnow event, our lives got much harder. That those guys who came back were not our boyfriends. Glitches, alternate reality timelines, we just did not consider these as possibilities at the time. But looking back, we were with our boyfriends. We were so very happy. They were going to buy us dragons. Case notes for file 711. They were going to buy us dragons. So I've never experienced thundersnow myself, but it sounds fascinating. I have seen lightning in a great distance during just driving at night with my family. This was so long ago, maybe 20 years ago. My uncle was visiting from the US and I was still in Canada with my mom. Anyways, just in the great distance you'd see lightning and it was snowing outside, which I thought was weird, but never heard any thunder. I actually did a bit of digging around, just Googling what this was about, and there's a news anchor that reacted to this and I found it fascinating, his expression of pure awe. Like never seeing this before. He was just reporting live, like a weather anchor I guess, and this thundersnow event occurred, and it really is fascinating. It seems out of place, is the best way to put it. Now, as far as this event actually triggering some sort of universal crossover, I guess it's not inconceivable. We don't know exactly what triggers it. We know that death seems to transpose consciousnesses, so you'll die and go to a different universe. But did that happen here? There was thundersnow, so previously there was lightning, it hit you, and you're in another universe? But then, what about your friend? Now, maybe you're just assigning this event as some sort of mystical thing, when it was just an interesting event that happened, very rare, and you're assigning it more importance than it actually plays. I don't know. There's also another angle to this, where lightning does create very strong EM fields, for a very short amount of time. But even before or after, there's a charge in the atmosphere that you can feel. And I wonder if this charge has an effect on people's mindset, if you're around lightning all the time. There's actually a lake in Venezuela, Lake Maracaibo, where lightning is striking 300 times a night every single night and they don't know exactly what causes it. It's perpetual lightning. And I do wonder how much of an effect this has on people. It must have some effect. Bonus file. Written by Daedalus Waxwings. I have a little ghost girl in my house. I bought my first house 9 months ago. It's a huge accomplishment for me. In the evening after I closed on the house, I had a little champagne toast in a new place. I invited my boyfriend, my sister, we'll call her J, her 4-year-old daughter, we'll call her M, my best friend, Aunt T, and my son and brother, who live with me. It only lasted an hour or two. I gave everyone the tour. My best friend and Jay wanted to stop in every room and talk about my plans for it. I ordered pizza. We had a champagne toast. My niece, M, had a great time running through the house. She and my sister have a 700 square foot apartment, so my place seemed huge to her. M loved my room. I have a closet in my room with a built-in pedestal kind of thing, so we sat her on it and joked that it could be her room. All in all, it was a good time. Everyone, who didn't live there, headed out around the same time, starting with J and M. It was a school night. Not even 5 minutes after J and M left, my sister calls me, still driving home. My sister sounded shaken, and I was worried for a second that her car broke down or she got into an accident, but no. J says she asked M if she had a good time and if she liked Aunt Daedalus Waxwing's new place. M says, "Yeah, I had fun with Aunt Daedalus, Aunt T, and the little girl." My sister said she actually pumped the brakes on the car because her instinct was to stop the car in its tracks. There were no other children in the house that night, just M. Jay is trying not to scare M, but she wants to know more, so she gently asks, "Oh, what little girl?" M says, "The one that was standing behind Aunt Daedalus all night." My sister presses her a little more and asks M what the little girl looks like. M says she has long black hair and she had on a pretty blue dress. My sister asked if the little girl spoke to her. M says no. She was shy, but she had fun chasing each other throughout the house, and the little girl was sitting in her house, aka my closet, when we opened the door. M hesitated to walk into the closet at first, and I didn't know why. Now I know why. Apparently, I have a little ghost girl in my house. She likes my closet and me. My house was built in the 1900s, so it has a long history, but I haven't really looked into it yet. I have not seen or heard a thing in this house since I moved in, but did not sleep well for the first few nights after hearing this. Case file number 712, written by R32 Fan, of a mighty pen and an album. A few days ago, I was studying Japanese and I dropped my pen. No big deal, it happens. I go to pick it up and I realize it isn't around me. I definitely heard it hit the carpet, so it should have been around the bottom of my desk or under the chair. I look around my room and I can't see it anywhere. I get up and walk into the next room to grab another pen, but the pen I dropped is lying on the floor there, in that room. This room is across the hall, around 4 to 5 meters away from my room. It shouldn't have been there at all. I know it was the same pen because I only have one pen that's shaped like a JNR C62 steam locomotive. Also, another thing happened to me yesterday. I had just finished listening to a Judas Priest album on vinyl, and I was putting it away. I placed it in front of the Diamond Head album and went through into the album repository, as I like to call it. It's literally just a library full of albums, and pick out The Great Radio Controversy, an album by Tesla. I walk back to the record player, put the Tesla album on, and go back to my sofa. I sit down and look towards the record player and notice that against the cabinet where I put the Judas Priest album, there is now a Diamond Head's Borrowed Time rather than said Judas Priest album. I looked through all of the albums that were there, but I couldn't find it. The only albums that were there were the ones that were there before, the Diamond Head, Cannibal Corpse, and Sepultura. I don't listen to that heavy stuff. I just had a few friends around a few days earlier and they're into that stuff. The Judas Priest album showed up in the most stupid place, in between the Gary Moore albums. I definitely didn't put it there, meaning there is no other explanation other than teleportation or some kind of poltergeist. Case notes for file 712, The Mighty Pen and the album. Strike it up for another solid DOP event. But this one's a bit interesting with the carpet, because when you think about it, when you're dropping an object, sometimes it'll bounce. It'll hit at just an angle where the physics play into it to propel the object way further than you think possible. And so that's what a lot of people think when they hear about disappearing object phenomena, especially when it's a dropped object. Well, it just bounced somewhere and you can't find it. It went under the dresser or the bed or in some place you're just not seeing, maybe playing on the angles of objects. But if it's carpet, well, it's not going to bounce very far no matter what. And in this case, it's through another room. And you only have one pen that looks very unique. So, yeah. And then there's the album. Well, whatever it is, maybe it is a poltergeist, that's conceivable. Or it's just the cross-dimensional entities, and maybe they just didn't like Judas Priest, so they returned it expediently. Case file number 713, written by S.S. Destiel. When everyone remembers your mother dying, not your father. I work in the admitting department of my local hospital, and I also help the business office with miscellaneous billing duties. One of the things I do is keep track of obituaries. When someone's obituary appears in the newspaper, I check to see if they still owe the hospital money. If they do, I clip the obit, fill out a form, and then keep track of how their insurance pays and whatnot. A few years ago, I've worked there 20 plus years. One of my coworkers in the dietary department retired and passed away soon after. I know because I processed her obituary. This coworker's daughter was really good friends with my cousin, so the daughter was even over at my cousin's house the day after my coworker's funeral. They had a big wake for her mother and everything. Today, as I'm working ER registration, the daughter comes in and says her mom is in the ER. I was brought up short. I thought, what? I didn't say anything for a moment, so my office mate had to step in for me and look up this lady's mother. Sure as hell, it's the mother who died years ago. My office mate lets the daughter back into the ER to see her mom, and I am unable to find the obit form I filled out. I heard back from my cousin, and he's as weirded out as I am. Coworker's daughter has no memory of the wake or anything, but she said she's been getting this stuff from the people around her for the past few days. People remember her mom dying, even funeral details and the like, but a coworker's daughter doesn't remember any of it. Plus, her mom is right there. It's freaky. Spoke with my cousin instead of texting him. Coworker's daughter said it was her dad that died and not her mom. But she also said that's not the way any of the people who run into her remember it. They're asking where her dad is, how he is today. He's not answering his phone or texts, etc. And to her, the man has been dead over 10 years. I've been asked if I had any close calls or moments where I couldn't slip from one universe to another, and yes, there was one. It was a little over 2 years ago. I was getting my evening medications together, but I was tired and screwed them up. I ended up taking the entire full bottle of glipizide, which is a medication that lowers your blood sugar. I accidentally took enough to kill a horse. I realized it right as I laid down for a nap due to extreme exhaustion, and I felt really weird going to sleep. Looking back on it, I think I fell asleep forever, there, and woke up here. Case notes for file 713. My father died, not my mother. So there's evidence here that points to two different types of glitches, but they don't quite add up together. So when you overconsumed glipizide, I think is what you called it, the medication that controls your blood sugar. If you took enough to kill a horse, then I don't see how you would have survived. More likely you did indeed die and were transposed to a different universe. If this happened, it would explain you remembering something that didn't happen, but it wouldn't explain how so many people in your coworker's daughter's life also misremember it. Why do so many people think it was her mother that died and not her father? If it's simply a glitch of quantum immortality, you're in a different universe and something is different, well, it wouldn't reflect in this way where other people are also misremembering. It's like a localized, regional Mandela effect in real time. And I don't know what would cause that. But it does make me think, what if quantum immortality, when we die, what if people nearby to us, people we're connected with, if they die in a similar time frame, Maybe their consciousnesses go to the same new alternate universe that you go to. I wonder who decides this. Is it some sort of programming within the universe? Or are there server mods that look at who are dying and they compare them to their family tree, their friends, people that are close, and those people that are close, if they die, they go to the same new universe as the first person. It would make some degree of sense to keep people connected, keeping those bonds alive. Bonus file, written by RichieFingers99. We all need to be reminded to love. A few weeks after my dad died, I woke up one night and he was standing at the foot of my bed. He didn't move or speak, he just stood there with a little smile. I was obviously surprised and still half asleep, so my response was, "What are you doing here? You're dead." I realize this sounds like an odd thing to say to a recently deceased parent, but my dad and I were best friends and shared a sense of humor where we could never offend each other. He worshipped the ground I walked on, and I his. We loved each other completely. If I'd said that to him while alive, I'd have gotten a big laugh in response. I sat there looking at him for a minute, confused, thinking, nah, this is all just a dream, and then laid down and went back to sleep. The following afternoon, I got a call from my sister. I could tell straight away from the cracked tone in her voice that it wasn't just a random call. I almost knew why she was calling. We exchanged pleasantries and then I say, "I dreamt about Dad last night." Without hesitation, she replies, "He came to see you too, didn't he?" She'd had the exact same dream. She woke up and he was standing at the foot of her bed with a cheeky little smile on his face. A few years earlier, my mom had died from cancer and I wasn't taking it very well. I was 19 at the time and spiraling. I'd randomly started crying and was struggling to cope. I'd often hold it in during the day and wait for my girlfriend to go to bed before having a little cry by myself on the sofa. So I'm sitting there on the sofa one night, head on my knees looking down at the floor quietly sobbing when I assumed my girlfriend was walking in the room. It was near Christmas and we'd been wrapping presents, so there was wrapping paper on the floor. She stood next to me on top of the wrapping paper, making a crinkling noise, and put her hand on the back of my head. I wipe the tears away and say, I'm okay. I'm coming to bed." Then I look up and there's nobody there. My girlfriend was still sound asleep in the next room. God, I miss them. If you're lucky enough to have parents that are still alive, cherish every last second with them. I didn't realize in writing this that I'd have to relive the emotions I felt at the time. I've shed a few tears tonight. As the years pass, I suppose we all just get on with life and try to ignore the things that cause us pain. We have to, I guess. I'd forgotten how much I missed them and what wonderful people they were. It's good to be reminded. Bonus file, written by Armored Meerkat. The ghost of my husband saved my life. The ghost of my husband saved my life. My husband passed away suddenly in 2006, in January. I was cooped up, coping with my loss most of the spring and summer. My friends told me to take some time off and have a road trip. I agreed. I decided to drive from Michigan to Chicago. I started to arrange hotels, look up routes, and so on. There were no smartphones and DLS was just catching on. Anytime I tried to check hotels, my modem died on me and had to be reset. I became frustrated and yelled, "Don't you dare mess with my car." The day before the trip, I was getting ready to go to work and was at the door when I heard a loud. The area was not the best neighborhood, so I assumed it was a gunshot or a car backfired. I got into my car and pulled out of the driveway. Suddenly, I hear the dreaded flecka flecka sound of a flat tire. I have no spare tire, so I had to call a friend to ask for a ride to work. Later that afternoon, I took the flat tire to get a new one. When the mechanic looked at the tire, he told me that I was very lucky. It was totally worn out, but it was not visible from the outside. If I would have gotten on the road with that tire, I might not have made it back alive. When I got back home, I thanked my husband's spirit for saving my life. I now have a Patreon. If you'd like to support the channel, please feel free. Now on to the next story. Case file number 714, written by Karen's Wine. Everyone knows me in this town that I don't live in. today, I went into a town in a state that I don't live in. I'm here, in the state, working for the summer, and my job takes place in a town 2 hours away from this one. So I'm in this faraway town, and the first thing I do is go to a coffee shop, one I've been to maybe once before today, but over 2 years ago. I order my food, order my drink, pay in cash, and then get handed my drink at the counter before I take my number and sit down. I didn't notice until I'm at the table that my cup had my name written on it, but I never mentioned it to the barista. She never asked. I brush it off and go about my day. I spend the day in this town and end the night by going to a local bar with a couple of my friends. I have never been to this bar. I never usually stay late in these faraway towns because I usually work early the next day. As we're walking to the car, a homeless man on the sidewalk calls out my name, nothing else. My friends explicitly heard my name as well. My name doesn't rhyme with anything. I can't think of anything that remotely sounds like it. I don't think I'll be sleeping tonight. Also, I only had one drink at the bar. One of my sober friends, the designated driver, also heard the homeless man say my name. I also went back and left my number with the morning shift barista. She said she'll give it to the one that served me yesterday. Maybe I'll get some answers. Case notes for file 714. Everyone knows me in a town I don't live in. So this reminds me of a story I narrated rather recently, maybe a month ago. It was actually the first story I went on camera to narrate my thoughts about. But it was this girl who, all her life, people were addressing her as a different name than her actual name. They were calling her Jennifer, if I recall. But her name didn't even start with a J, it didn't sound anything like Jennifer. Maybe you just have one of those presences or faces that looks like the name that everyone was calling you, and people just assume instinctively. Only the difference with this story is that they'd all be correct. But the thing is, how you write the story implies that it doesn't happen anywhere else, or at least it never has. Maybe it'll happen in other places. But my instinct is saying that that's not exactly what's happening here. Something else is going on. So what else could it be? I'm thinking universal crossover. I think often we're switching between realities without realizing it, because universes are so similar. I think we're constantly in a state of flux within the multiverse. It's not as stable as people assume. This is just my speculation, but I think it's correct. We're constantly crossing over into different universes and not realizing it until sometimes we do realize it because there's a difference in the universe you temporarily occupied. People knew you because you probably go there all the time. Maybe in that universe, on a more permanent basis, you're working nearby, so you go there all the time to that exact coffee place, the barista knew your name. One thing though, you were traveling with your friends, presumably, they don't live in that town, so you all crossed over to the same universe, and then came back to the same one too. I'm assuming your friends act and behave the same. Almost like the quantum foam, where there's always fluctuations that we can't quite see or pinpoint, and we could definitely not try to predict it. It's pure chaos. Maybe there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just an aberration of how the universe works. Sort of like asking, why is gravity gravity, or electromagnetism electromagnetism? They just are. At a certain point, that's just the answer. It just is. If you keep digging, there has to be at some point a ground level where you can't go any further. Because if you can keep digging infinitely, then there is no universal absolute truth. It's just that neither way is it satisfying, because there's always questions to ask, and at some point it just can't be answered. As the great Philip K. Dick said, this is a cardboard universe. If you lean too long or too heavily on it, you fall through. I think we're constantly falling through. We just don't realize it. Case file number 715, written by Kid No 1. My wife talking downstairs from work. I've had maybe 2 or 3 weird things happen in my life and thought it's finally time for me to share with you all. So this happened about 6 years ago. My wife was at work and wouldn't be home until around 11 at night. It was around 8 at night and I was finishing giving my 2 children a bath. I got my 3-year-old out first and brought her to my room to get her dressed. We were sort of chatting while I helped her put on her PJs when I heard something, and we both stopped and listened at the same time. It sounded like their mother, my wife, of course, talking loudly to someone downstairs. I told her to stay in my room, and I walked out into the hall and stood for a second. I could hear her clearly. It sounded like she was talking on the phone with someone. I walked to the stairs and noticed that it is completely dark downstairs, which is odd because my wife wouldn't be standing in the dark talking so loudly. So as I start down the stairs, the talking stops. I get to the bottom and listen for a second, but it is dead quiet. I check around and every light is still off and all doors locked. Nothing was out of place. So I went back upstairs into the bathroom and asked my son, who was still in the tub, if he had also heard someone talking just now. He said yes. I asked him who it sounded like and he said, "Mommy." I got him out of the tub and into my room. I call my wife, but she doesn't answer, so I tell the kids are sleeping in my bed with me tonight. Later around 11, my wife gets home, wakes me up asking why the kids are in our bed. I asked her if she had come home earlier and she says no, she was at work all night. I then told her what happened. We moved the kids to their beds, and that was that. We lived in that house for 10 years, and that was the one and only time something inexplicable happened. Case file number 716, written by Mushroom Cows, the most mysterious ham sandwich in the world. So I live in a flat with my mom, and it's just the two of us. My mom has forgotten her work lunch in the past, and one morning I woke up to find a ham bun in the fridge and texted her to see if she wanted me to bring any lunch into work. She said she had her lunch already. I didn't think too much of it and just carried on the rest of the day. 4 days later, this bun is still in the fridge. I take it to the living room and ask why she left it there for so long. The reason I was so sure it was hers is because it was squashed, and my mom and I are the only two people I know that squash sandwiches before eating them, but not before putting them in our bags. Anyway, she denies it being her sandwich and tells me it's mine. Well, that would be a neat trick given that I'm vegan. It was a ham sandwich. I show her and then I harp on that the bun is cut in half and the sandwich bag is sealed. We never ever cut buns in half, we eat them whole, and we always twist sandwich bags and never seal them. We then realize we've not had any buns for about a month and my mom's been using leftover roast chicken on her sandwiches, so there hasn't been any ham in the fridge for over a week. It was one of our sandwich bags, however, which is so odd. We called up other family members and asked if they left it there. No one else had been in the flat at all for over a week though, and it belonged to no one. I am very concerned and also baffled. Bonus file, written by Successful Register 25, Logan, the friendly puppeteer. I'm grieving. I lost my best friend yesterday. I can't stop crying. My cat got diagnosed with polycystic kidney disease a month ago. He fought hard, but you could see he was declining, even if he did his best to hide it away. So I took the difficult decision to help him cross into that rainbow bridge before he felt the pain that was getting closer day by day. His kidneys were just cysts now. The vet came to my home and then he left this world while I held him like a baby on our bed. He just went to sleep. I went to have him cremated that same day, and as I came back with his remains, his brother started acting weird. My other cat started to do things only the one that left did, like pushing the water fountain before drinking. He also started playing like he used to play with Logan, my dear cat that left, but he was playing alone. I couldn't think much about it as I couldn't sleep that day in my house. I went to sleep with my best friend. She also has a cat. She woke me up at 3:26 a.m. so I could hear her cat being playful with something, as if there was another cat, but there was nothing there. Told me she's never done that before. My Logan passed at 3:20 p.m. approximately that day. Next day, I came home and I put on a movie my cat used to like. Whenever I put on that movie, he would come to see it with me. And then somehow my mouse moved, which was normal for Logan to do as he liked to sleep on that desk. I don't know if I'm going crazy, if his soul still doesn't understand what happened. I don't know, maybe I'm just grieving, seeing things. Have you ever felt something like this before? I wish it was him, not going to lie. Case file number 717, written by Dylan Roy. The town that doesn't exist. I live in very rural southern Appalachia, and yesterday I was going over to the next county to look at a lawn mower. It's an area I'm very familiar with, although I haven't been to the area in over a year. While on the way, I came upon a town that has never been there before. Now, there is a small community there, and it was by the same name, but this was a full-fledged small town. Had a couple red lights, a main street with probably 15 to 20 storefronts, everything. I was so taken aback, I stopped in the middle of the road. After a few moments, a car behind me honked the horn, so I pulled into a parallel spot and got out. The small towns in my area are all the same, tiny, dingy, run down. Had a heyday in the 50s and 60s, but all have fallen into disrepair. Not this one. Everything was pristine and new looking. Swept sidewalks, shiny windows, and clean brick. The people I saw were dressed in modern clothes and had the same appearance that most people in the area have. Healthy, but weather-beaten and aged beyond their years. The vehicles I saw were fairly modern, new to 20 years old. Nothing out of the ordinary. I walked into the little restaurant, Cream of the Crop Cafe, and it looked like every other little restaurant in the area. Booths and tables, a bar top with a register, and the kitchen behind it. Some cheesy James Dean and Marilyn Monroe pictures on the walls. I walked up to the girl at the counter and asked her where I was. She seemed puzzled because I could tell she knew I was local by my attire and my accent, but she said, "Minneapolis." I said, "So this is Minneapolis? When did they build all this?" Again, she looked puzzled and said, "I don't know, the 1800s sometime?" I couldn't handle it anymore, so I just left. Got in my truck and went on to look at the lawnmower. On my way back through, about an hour later, there was Minneapolis, like it should be. Just a couple houses and an old general store. No town, no red lights, no cafe, no sidewalks. Freaked me out something awful. I've never experienced something like this, as I'm pretty mundane and boring. It wasn't a hallucination, I don't think. Everything else was the same. It wasn't a dream, so I don't know. Case notes for file 717. The town that doesn't exist. There are plenty of instances where people are witnessing rooms and areas and even entire towns that simply don't exist in this universe. But in all these cases, they're momentary. Is it as simple to explain as a crossover event? Honestly, lately I'm beginning to think that these crossover events are very frequent. Like we're in a superposition state of quantum flux between universes. And these changes, these fluctuations are happening very often. It's just that we don't notice it because the changes between universes are so tiny, and often there may not even be detectable changes, they could be subatomic. I also don't think this could be a time anomaly because you described that there are cars there that look modern. So it does sound like a different universe, not a glimpse into the past. It's just a reality where in that particular Appalachian Minneapolis, it's just more developed than in the current one. I was very curious, so I did a Google Maps scan of the area, assuming it's the town that is in North Carolina. If so, the development is very sparse indeed. There was a church that I saw, post office, just an inn, and some houses. There wasn't even a 4-lane crossing where traffic lights would be installed, and there definitely weren't any traffic lights anywhere. Moreover, I don't think you could possibly have confused this for a different town because it's a straight shot. There's only one road that's going through. And it leads up north, where even in that town, I don't think there was a cafe that I saw, and there's no traffic lights either. It is a bit more developed, with a general store and stuff like that, but there is no real development like you described. So no, I think this was a simple case of a crossover event. Temporary, and I wish I could tell you why it happens. I just think that it's happening very often, very frequently. If I had to give a gut instinct on how it happens, or at least when, it would be when we're in a lower state of consciousness, so dreaming or sleeping or very tired, where our consciousness isn't quite as rooted in and anchored in the current universe. That would be my guess. Case file number 718, written by Blue Eyes 284, The Universe and Radio. 2 days ago, we were driving home from another country. We chose to drive at night to avoid the high temperatures and the traffic, but we only partially managed to do that because many others had the same bright idea. The highway was full of drivers in a rush, frantically changing lanes, speeding way above the limit, so all of this felt like a bad idea from the start. My husband, the driver, felt tired even before starting off at 9 p.m., and by 1 a.m. he felt even more tired. I tried to keep him talking and gave him coffee, but he had a few moments when it felt like we might need to stop. I felt alert and fine, but I've been sipping on an energy drink the whole trip. Around 2:30 a.m., we started talking about the attention wildlife sign. You know, the one with the deer running across lanes and trying to imagine what would happen if we hit anything at 140 kilometers an hour. He said that at one time, I answered 304 to something he said, but I don't remember that. What I do remember is that around 2:54, a fox darted straight for our car, and I think we hit it. We were fine though. The next thing I remember is the clock showing 3:05 and my neck burning with pain, feeling hot and sticky and smelling blood. I panicked and turned on the lights, but there was nothing wrong. I had no signs on my neck, no bruises, nothing was different. The pain itself faded in 5 minutes, and so did the smell. I think I died and jumped dimensions at 3:04. I think we already hit a deer, and the fact I'm stupid enough to wear a seatbelt with its edge on the side of my neck because it feels weird on my boobs actually killed me. My husband doesn't remember anything weird happening. The kids were asleep the whole time, so as far as they are concerned, nothing happened. I know some of you will say I fell asleep after we talked about precisely this scenario, and that caused me to dream it vividly. The thing is, I can never sleep in a moving vehicle because I have car sickness, and closing my eyes will instantly make me sick. I have never fallen asleep in a car in my whole life. So what do you think happened? Oh, and I just remembered something else. When we were talking about the possibility of hitting an animal, my husband switched radio stations, and there was a remix of a 90s song I heard for the first time. I remember telling him that this is the first time in decades I heard this song, and that the radio station is the best. After the weird smell or pain thing happened, so about 15 minutes after, I noticed the radio was playing the same song on the same station, and I mentioned this to him, but he didn't understand what I meant by this and said he never heard the song before, and that he just switched the radio to that particular station randomly. Case file number 719. Written by Retribution, 1824. Ghostly Balls in the Sky. I think it was summer, about 1990. I lived in a small town in Pennsylvania. A friend and I were heading to the next town over, and we were taking a shortcut on a rural road. There were a few houses on this road. We reached a stop sign, intending to turn right to head towards the main road. There was a house on our left. It was dark outside at the time, and we saw a strange pattern of lights above the house. We thought maybe they were having a get-together in the back, and what we were seeing was sort of dance light, like the ball in a dance club. Haze and fog aren't uncommon, so we thought the light was just hitting low-hanging fog. The light pattern was ghostly pale, not bright at all. It consisted of a central round light surrounded by smaller circular round balls, smaller than the center one. It was like 20 feet over the top of the house. The outer balls would rotate around the center, slow to a stop, converge towards the center ball, then return to their former position and begin to rotate again. We sat there for about 2 minutes, watching, debating what it was. The owner must have seen us sitting at the stop, and they turned the porch light on and opened the front door. We just left at that point. As we reached the main road, we saw the light moving across the sky. It was dim, and the mountain terrain made it difficult to keep it in sight. We saw it off in the distance, not at a very high altitude, but a fair distance from us. We eventually lost sight of it as the road ran downhill, and then never saw it again. To this day, I still have no idea what we saw. It didn't appear to be solid, but rather ghostly glowing balls. We told some friends what we saw, and of course we were laughed at. Still talk to my buddy. We're 1,200 miles apart now, but he remembers too. I'm not making any claims in the least, just saying I have no idea what it was.